When I posted about my achievements on Instagram, my mom commented, "Stop bragging, nobody cares. Your brother will be always our pride." But they cared when their $5,400 monthly bills stopped getting paid. Hey Reddit, buckle up, because this story is a long one. But trust me, the ending makes it worth it. I've been sitting on this for a while now, but after everything that's gone down, I need to get it off my chest. I am Lisa, 29 years old, and I've got a brother, Jake, who's 32. I'm dating a man named Lucas. Growing up, our family dynamic was pretty much what you'd expect from every other story you've read on here about golden child syndrome. Jake was the chosen one, the athlete, the social butterfly, the kid who could do no wrong. Me? I was the quiet, nerdy kid who spent more time with books than people. From the time we were little, my parents made it crystal clear who their favorite was. Jake played varsity football and baseball, had a ton of friends, and dated the popular girls. I was in robotics club, debate team, and spent my Friday nights building computers or learning to code. Not exactly what my dad had in mind for his kids, you know. The favoritism wasn't even subtle, and Jake got a brand new truck for his 16th birthday, a shiny red with all the bells and whistles. I remember standing in the driveway watching him get handed the keys, and when I asked what I'd be getting, Dad just pointed to a rusty Honda Civic with 200,000 $1,000,000 on it. "That'll teach you responsibility," he said, like somehow getting a piece of car was character building, while Jake's truck was a reward for existing. The college thing was even worse. When Jake wanted to go to college, they paid his full tuition at a prestigious private university, $45,000 a year, no questions asked. They bought him a laptop, paid for his dorm, gave him a credit card for emergencies, and made sure he had spending money for social activities. When I got accepted to an equally good school with a partial scholarship that would have cut the costs in half, they told me I'd have to figure out the rest myself because Jake's education was more important for his future, and computer science isn't a real career anyway. I worked my ass off through college. I'm talking 30 hours a week at various jobs, campus IT support, weekend shifts at Best Buy, tutoring other students, even delivering pizzas until 2 a.m. on weeknights. I maintained a 3.88 GPA in computer science while living on ramen noodles, generic cereal, and whatever free food I could scourge from campus events. My dorm room looked like a monk's cell compared to most student setups. Meanwhile, Jake was living it up at his fancy university. His Instagram was full of fraternity parties, spring break trips to Cancun, expensive dinners at trendy restaurants. Mom and Dad not only paid his tuition, but also sent him $800 a month for living expenses. When I'd mentioned struggling to afford textbooks or having to choose between gas money and groceries, Mom would just say something like, "Well, maybe you should have chosen a more practical major like your brother," or, "This is good for you, it's building character." I remember one particularly rough semester when my laptop died right before finals. I had 3 major programming projects due and no way to complete them. I called home asking if they could help me get a replacement. Nothing fancy, just something that could run the software I needed. Dad's response was that I should have been more careful with my things, and maybe this would teach me to save money better. That same week, I saw on Facebook that they'd bought Jake a new MacBook Pro because his was running a little slow. Jake barely scraped by with a 2.7 GPA, and I'm being generous with that number. I later found out from one of his fraternity brothers that he'd actually failed 2 classes senior year and had to do summer school just to graduate. But at his graduation ceremony, you'd have thought he'd just won a Nobel Prize. My parents threw him this massive party at the local country club, invited about 100 people, had it catered, the works. There was a slideshow of his achievements, which mostly consisted of photos from parties, and one picture of him in his cap and gown. When I graduated, summa cum laude with a 3.91 GPA and departmental honors, I got a card in the mail with $50 in it and a text saying, "Congrats, proud of you." That was it. No party, no celebration, not even a phone call. I found out later that they'd scheduled Jake's wisdom teeth removal for my graduation day and spent the weekend taking care of him instead of attending my ceremony. When I called to ask why nobody showed up, Mom said, "Well, you didn't really need us there. You're so independent." But Jake really needed us right now. After college, Jake bounced around different sales jobs like a pinball. His first job was at a luxury car dealership where he lasted 4 months before getting fired for spending more time taking selfies with the cars than actually selling them. Then it was insurance sales where he made it 6 months before they caught him lying to clients about policy details. After that came a stint selling gym memberships, followed by a brief period hawking timeshares over the phone. Each time he got fired, Mom and Dad had excuses ready. He's just figuring himself out. Or those companies didn't appreciate his potential. Or my personal favorite, he's too honest for sales. These companies want people who will lie to customers. Meanwhile, I landed a junior developer position at a promising tech startup right out of college and kept my head down, learning everything I could from senior engineers and taking on whatever projects they'd give me. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While Jake was busy being the family golden boy and failing at life, I was quietly building something. That startup I joined, it was acquired by a major tech company 3 years later, and my stock options made me a pretty decent chunk of change. Not life-changing money, but enough to put a down payment on a house and have some breathing room. Instead of celebrating my success, my parents were more concerned about Jake's latest career crisis. He'd been fired from the timeshare gig after 3 months for what his manager called chronic tardiness and unprofessional attitude toward clients. By this point, he was living back at home at 25, sleeping in his childhood bedroom that still had his high school football trophies on the shelves. He'd wake up around noon, play video games until dinner, then go out with whatever friends would still put up with his constant complaining about how unfair life was. But when I bought my first house, a modest 3-bedroom place in a decent neighborhood that I'd saved for 2 years to afford, the only comment I got was Mom saying, "Must be nice to not have any real responsibilities. Some of us have to worry about more than just ourselves." The irony of her saying this about her daughter, who was supporting herself while her other child played Xbox all day, apparently didn't register. That's when I made a decision that would change everything, though I didn't know it at the time. My parents were struggling financially. Dad had been laid off from his manufacturing job a few years earlier and was working part-time at Home Depot. Mom worked as a receptionist at a dental office. They were having trouble making their mortgage payments and keeping up with bills. Jake, being the unemployed golden child living at home, wasn't contributing anything. So guess who they came to for help? That's right, the disappointment daughter, who apparently had no real responsibilities. They didn't ask directly at first, because that would have required acknowledging that their golden child was a complete failure who couldn't support himself, let alone contribute to the household. Instead, it started with casual mentions about how tight money was, how the mortgage payment was getting harder to manage, how they might have to sell the house they'd lived in for 20 years. Dad would make comments about how his part-time wages at Home Depot barely covered groceries, and Mom would sigh dramatically about choosing between paying the electric bill and filling up her car. The guilt trips were masterfully orchestrated. They'd call me just to chat, then work in some comment about skipping dinner to save money, or how they couldn't afford to fix Dad's truck when it broke down. They'd mention how embarrassed they were to have Jake living at home at his age, but they couldn't exactly kick out their unemployed son, could they? Eventually, after months of this psychological warfare, Mom straight up asked if I could help with some bills, just until Jake gets back on his feet and can contribute to the household again. I probably should have said no right then, but I actually felt bad for them. Despite everything, they were my parents, and I didn't want to see them lose their house. So I started paying their mortgage, $2,100 a month. Then it was the car payments when Dad's truck and Mom's sedan were about to get repossessed. Another $800 total. Then utilities, insurance, groceries, and before I knew it, I was covering about $5,400 in their monthly expenses. The kicker, they never once said thank you, not once in 3 years. The money just disappeared from my account every month like some kind of automatic tax on being the responsible daughter. It was treated as an obligation, like I owed them for the privilege of being born second to their favorite child. When I'd make a comment about needing to work extra hours to cover their bills, Mom would actually get annoyed, like I was complaining about some minor inconvenience rather than supporting 3 grown adults. Meanwhile, Jake was still unemployed, still living at home rent-free, still being treated like a prince while I was basically funding their entire lifestyle. He'd sleep until noon, spend the afternoon playing Call of Duty, then go out at night to bars he couldn't afford, somehow always finding money for drinks and Uber rides home. When I asked Mom where Jake was getting spending money, she got defensive and said he was networking and that going out was important for finding job opportunities. The worst part was family gatherings during this period. Jake would show up in new clothes, talking about some business idea he'd had or some connection he'd made, while I'd be checking my phone to approve overtime shifts just to make sure I could cover everyone's bills that month. But in the family's eyes, Jake was still the successful one because he looked the part and talked a good game, while I was just the boring computer girl who worked too much. This went on for almost 3 years. 3 years of me working 60-hour weeks, taking on extra projects, and living way below my means so my family could maintain their standard of living, while Jake played Call of Duty and applied to maybe one job a month. During this time, my career took off in ways I never could have imagined. The startup environment was perfect for someone willing to work hard and learn fast. I went from fixing bugs to building entire features, then leading small projects, then managing other developers. When the company got acquired by a major tech corporation, my stock options were suddenly worth serious money. Not just house down payment money, but enough to completely change my financial situation. The acquiring company offered me a promotion to stay on as engineering manager, which came with a salary that was double what I'd been making. I also started doing freelance consulting on weekends, building mobile apps for small businesses who needed custom solutions. Every project taught me something new and expanded my professional network. Then I got into cryptocurrency early, back when Bitcoin was still under $1,000, and most people thought it was a scam. By the time I turned 28, I was doing pretty damn well for myself. 6-figure salary, healthy investment portfolio, nice house that I'd already paid down significantly, and I was finally getting recognized in my field. Tech blogs started featuring my projects. I was invited to speak at developer conferences, and industry publications began quoting me as an expert in mobile development. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was getting the recognition I deserved, just not from the people I'd spent my whole life trying to impress. Throughout all of this, my family's attitude toward me never changed. I was still the weird computer nerd who got lucky. Jake was still the golden child, even though he'd managed to get fired from a car dealership job after 6 months because he kept showing up hungover. Last month, I hit a major milestone in my career. The app I'd been developing in my spare time got acquired by a Fortune 500 company for $2.3 million. It was a huge deal for me, the culmination of 2 years of nights and weekends and honestly validation that I knew what I was doing. I was proud as hell. So I posted about it on Instagram. Nothing crazy, just a professional photo of me signing the contracts with a caption about being grateful for the opportunity and how hard work pays off. The kind of post any normal person would be happy to see from their family member. Within an hour, my post had dozens of likes and congratulatory comments from friends, colleagues, and even some distant relatives. People were genuinely excited for me, sharing their own stories about perseverance and success. It felt good to finally have something to celebrate publicly. Then I saw the comment that changed everything. My mom had commented, "Stop bragging, nobody cares. Your brother will always be our pride." I stared at that comment for probably 10 minutes straight. Not only had she publicly humiliated me on what should have been a celebratory post, but she'd done it in front of my professional network, my friends, my colleagues, everyone. The crying, laughing emoji was the cherry on top, like my biggest achievement was some kind of joke to her. The comment had been up for maybe 20 minutes when I started getting private messages from people. Former colleagues asking if everything was okay at home. Friends who knew my family situation just sending supportive messages. Even my old college roommate sent a screenshot asking, "Did your mom really just comment this on your post about selling your app?" I felt humiliated, angry, and honestly, just done. 29 years of this, and she chose the moment of my biggest professional achievement to remind me that I'd never be Jake in her eyes, the moment I'd worked toward my entire adult life, and she couldn't even pretend to be happy for me. I deleted her comment and blocked her on Instagram, but the damage was done. I knew she'd screenshot it, probably sent it to her sister with some comment about how I was getting too big for my britches. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking about that comment, about 3 years of paying their bills, about a lifetime of being second best. The next morning, I made a decision. I logged into my banking app and canceled every automatic payment I had set up for my parents: mortgage, car payments, insurance, utilities, everything. Then I drafted a text message to my mom. Since I'm apparently just someone who brags and nobody cares about my achievements, I figured you wouldn't want my money either. All financial support ends today. Thanks for the perspective. I sent it and immediately blocked both my parents' numbers. That was 3 weeks ago, and holy, the fallout has been spectacular. The first week was quiet. I figured they hadn't realized what happened yet, or maybe they thought I was just being dramatic and would come crawling back. I went about my business, focused on work, and honestly felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Week 2 is when things got interesting. My cousin Sarah, who I'm pretty close with, called me laughing her ass off. Apparently, my parents had shown up at her house in a panic because their mortgage payment had been returned for insufficient funds. They'd been so used to me paying their bills that they'd never kept track of when things were due or how much their monthly expenses actually were. Mom had apparently told Sarah some story about how I was going through a phase and acting out because Jake got a new job, which, by the way, was news to me. Turns out Jake had finally landed another sales position, his 7th job in 5 years, but was still living at home because he couldn't afford his own place. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. Sarah, who's always thought my parents treated me like garbage, apparently told them straight up that they needed to figure their own out and maybe try apologizing to me for once. Mom's response was that I was being dramatic and ungrateful. By week 3, the real panic had set in. Their utilities had been shut off. They'd received a foreclosure notice, and both car payments were past due. Dad had swallowed his pride and tried calling me from different numbers, but I'd blocked those too. They had even tried having Jake reach out, but I'd blocked him years ago after he'd called me a loser for not lending him money for a vacation. That's when they escalated to showing up at my house. I was working from home last Tuesday when I heard my doorbell ring. I looked through the security camera app on my phone and saw both my parents standing on my porch. Dad looked uncomfortable, but Mom had that determined expression she gets when she's about to make someone else's problem into their fault. I didn't answer the door. They rang the bell probably 15 times, then started knocking. I watched through the camera as Mom cupped her hands against my living room window, trying to see inside. She was saying something to Dad, probably about how I was definitely home because my car was in the driveway. After about 20 minutes, they finally left, but not before Mom left a handwritten note under my doormat. I waited an hour before going out to get it, just to make sure they were really gone. The note was exactly what you'd expect. A guilt trip masterpiece about how I was destroying the family and how they sacrificed everything to raise me and Jake. How they were disappointed in the woman I'd become, and how I was abandoning them in their time of need. No apology for the Instagram comment. No acknowledgement of the 3 years of financial support I'd provided. Nothing. The best part was the ending. Your brother would never treat us this way. We're proud of the man Jake has become, and we know he'll help us through this difficult time you've created. I took a picture of the note and posted it to my Instagram story with the caption, "The family that takes you for granted for 3 years, then shows up at your door when the money stops." I didn't tag anyone or provide context, but the people who mattered would understand. Within hours, I had dozens of messages from friends and colleagues who'd seen both the original Instagram post and my mom's comment before I deleted it. Turns out several people had screenshot her comment because they couldn't believe someone would actually post something like that about their own child's success. The story went kind of viral in my professional network. Not mainstream viral, but viral enough that it got shared around tech circles as an example of toxic family dynamics. Some senior developers I knew started sharing their own stories about family members who didn't support their careers or who only cared about them when they needed something. 2 days after the house visit, I got a call from Sarah again. This time she wasn't laughing. "Your parents are freaking out," she said. "They've been calling everyone in the family asking for money. Your mom tried to get me to give her your new address because she thinks you moved." "My address hasn't changed," I said. "I just don't answer the door when they show up." "Well, they're telling everyone you've cut them off completely and they might lose the house. Your Aunt Linda called me asking what happened." And when I told her about the Instagram comment, she couldn't believe it. That's when I learned that my extended family had been getting a very different version of events. According to my parents, I'd suddenly and cruelly cut off financial support for no reason and was refusing to help family. They'd conveniently left out the part about mom's public humiliation and 3 years of taking my support for granted. Sarah had apparently set the record straight with a few family members, sharing screenshots of mom's comment and explaining the real situation. The response was overwhelmingly supportive of me, which honestly felt pretty good. Your Aunt Linda wants Jake's phone number, Sarah told me. She said she's going to call him and ask why a 32-year-old man is living at home while his younger sister pays his parents' bills. I had to laugh at that. Aunt Linda has never been one to hold back her opinions. The next few days were apparently rough for my parents. Word had spread through the family about what actually happened, and suddenly they weren't getting the sympathy they expected. Aunt Linda had indeed called Jake and gave him an earful about being a grown man living off his sister's generosity. My grandma had called Mom and asked why she would post something so cruel about her own daughter's success. By Friday of that week, the financial reality had fully hit. They were facing foreclosure in 30 days. Both cars were going to be repossessed, and they had no money for groceries. Jake's new job was commission only, and he hadn't sold anything yet, so he wasn't contributing to household expenses. That's when they pulled out their final card. They had Jake's new girlfriend reach out to me on Instagram. I'd never met this girl, but she sent me a long message about how she'd heard there was a misunderstanding in the family and how Jake was really stressed about his parents' situation. She said Jake had told her what a successful and generous person I was, and she was sure I didn't want to see my family become homeless over a simple miscommunication. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. I screenshot the message and sent it to Sarah with the caption, "Seriously." But here's where it gets really good. I decided it was time to share my side of the story with the family. I wrote a detailed email explaining everything: the 3 years of financial support, the complete lack of gratitude, Jake living at home unemployed while I funded their lifestyle, and finally, Mom's Instagram comment. That was the last straw. I sent this email to every family member I could think of: aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, even some family friends who'd known us growing up. I included screenshots of Mom's original comment, the note she'd left at my house, and Jake's girlfriend's message trying to manipulate me into resuming financial support. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone started buzzing with text messages and calls from family members who had no idea what had been going on behind the scenes. Aunt Linda called me first. "I knew your parents had favorites, but I had no idea they'd been taking advantage of you like this," she said. "That Instagram comment made me sick to my stomach. What kind of mother does that to her own child?" My Uncle Dave, who's always been pretty straightforward, left me a voicemail. "Your parents should be ashamed of themselves. You don't owe them anything after the way they've treated you. If they lose the house, that's on them, not you." Even my grandmother, who usually tries to stay out of family drama, called to tell me she was proud of me for standing up for myself, and that she was embarrassed by her daughter's behavior. The family consensus was pretty clear. I'd been more than generous, my parents had taken me for granted, and Mom's Instagram comment was inexcusable. Several family members mentioned that they'd always noticed the favoritism toward Jake, but hadn't realized how bad it was or how it had continued into adulthood. That weekend, my parents made one final attempt. They showed up at my house again, this time with Jake in tow. I watched through my security camera as the three of them stood on my porch. Mom looked like she'd been crying. Dad looked defeated, and Jake looked pissed off. They rang the bell and knocked for almost an hour. I could hear Mom shouting through the door, apologizing for the Instagram comment, and begging me to work this out as a family. Dad was saying something about how they'd learned their lesson and would do better. But Jake was the one that made me glad I didn't answer the door. I could hear him yelling about how I was destroying the family over a stupid comment and how I was selfish for cutting them off. At one point, he started pounding on the door and threatening to knock some sense into me if I didn't come out and stop being a baby. I had my security system recording everything, and honestly, Jake's aggressive behavior just confirmed that I'd made the right decision. These weren't people who respected me or saw me as an equal. They saw me as an ATM who had the audacity to malfunction. After they finally left, I sent another message to the family group, this time with audio clips of Jake threatening me at my own front door. The response was even more supportive than before. Several family members reached out to say they'd told my parents to leave me alone and that they were embarrassed by Jake's behavior. It's been 2 weeks since then, and the consequences have been exactly what you'd expect. My parents received their official foreclosure notice. Both cars have been repossessed. They've had to swallow their pride and ask Jake's girlfriend if they can move in with her temporarily since Jake can't afford his own place. And none of the other family members are willing to take them in after learning how they treated me. The best part? Jake's girlfriend said no. Turns out she's not as invested in this family drama as Jake thought she'd be. She told him that if he wanted her to consider letting them stay, he needed to get his act together, get his own place, and prove he could support himself before taking on his parents as dependents. So now Jake is scrambling to find somewhere for all three of them to live, while still being unemployed and having no money for deposits or first month's rent. Several family members have told them they could probably stay temporarily if they sincerely apologized to me and tried to make things right. But my parents refused to admit they did anything wrong. According to Sarah, Mom is still telling people that I overreacted to a harmless comment and that I'm punishing the whole family because I'm jealous of Jake. She's apparently convinced that I'll eventually come around and resume financial support because family is family. She's wrong. Last week, I did something I probably should have done years ago. I used some of the money from selling my app to put a down payment on a vacation house in Colorado. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to do something nice for myself with money that I wasn't giving to people who didn't appreciate it. I posted about it on Instagram, of course. Professional photos of the mountain views, the modern kitchen, the hot tub on the deck, the works. The caption was simple: grateful for the freedom to invest in experiences and places that bring joy. Here's to surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your success instead of resenting it. The post got hundreds of likes and dozens of congratulatory comments. Friends, colleagues, even some family members who'd been following the drama were excited for me. It felt good to share something positive and be genuinely supported by the people who mattered. I know my parents saw the post because Sarah told me Mom called her crying, asking how I could throw money away on a vacation house when family was struggling. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 3 days ago, I got an unexpected call from Jake's girlfriend. Not a message through Instagram this time, but an actual phone call. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "I owe you an apology," she said right off the bat. "I had no idea what the real situation was when I messaged you before." Jake had told her I'd cut my parents off for no reason, and she believed him. Turns out she'd done some digging after my parents asked to move in with her. She'd talked to other family members, seen the screenshots of Mom's Instagram comment, and learned about the 3 years of financial support I'd provided. She'd also gotten to witness firsthand how Jake acted when he was stressed and couldn't mooch off family anymore. "He's not who I thought he was," she said. "When I told him I wasn't comfortable with his parents moving in, he threw a complete tantrum, started blaming you for everything and saying horrible things about you. It was really ugly." She told me she'd broken up with Jake the day before and kicked him out of her apartment. Apparently, without the safety net of his parents' house or her place, Jake had nowhere to go and no money to get his own place. "I just wanted you to know that you were right to protect yourself," she said. "Your family treated you terribly, and you don't owe them anything. I'm sorry I tried to guilt you into helping them." It was nice to hear. Honestly, this girl had been manipulated just like I had, and it took seeing Jake's true colors firsthand for her to understand what kind of people she was dealing with. Yesterday, I found out where things currently stand through Sarah. My parents are staying at a motel, paying daily rates because they couldn't afford a deposit anywhere. Jake is couch surfing with different friends, but apparently wearing out his welcome quickly because he has no job, no money, and a bad attitude about his situation. They're all still telling people that this is somehow my fault, that I'm vindictive and cruel, that I should help family regardless of how they've treated me. But fewer and fewer people are buying it. The family has largely sided with me, especially after witnessing Jake's behavior and learning about the years of financial support I provided without recognition. Sarah told me that my parents have started talking about bankruptcy and potentially moving into a low-income apartment somewhere. Jake is apparently considering moving back to our hometown where the cost of living is cheaper, though he'd have to find a job there first. None of this brings me any joy. Honestly, I didn't want my parents to become homeless or for Jake to struggle. What I wanted was basic respect and appreciation for the sacrifices I'd made for them. What I got was public humiliation at the moment of my biggest achievement. But I've learned something important through all of this. You can't set yourself on fire to keep people warm who wouldn't piss on you if you were actually burning. For 3 years, I prioritized their comfort over my own financial security and goals. I worked extra hours, took on additional projects, and lived below my means so they could maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. And when I finally had something to celebrate, something I'd worked my ass off to achieve, my mother's response was to publicly mock me and remind everyone that I'd never measure up to my unemployed brother. The family members who matter have all been incredibly supportive. They've told me they're proud of what I've accomplished and ashamed of how my parents treated me. They've made it clear that they understand why I cut off financial support and that they think I showed remarkable restraint in not doing it sooner. As for my parents and Jake, I genuinely hope they figure things out. I hope Dad finds stable employment and they can rebuild their financial stability. I hope Jake eventually grows up and learns to support himself. I hope Mom learns that publicly humiliating your children isn't an acceptable way to express whatever issues she has with them. The Instagram comment that started all of this is still burned into my memory. Stop bragging. Nobody cares. Your brother will always be our pride. She was right about one thing. She didn't care, but plenty of other people did. My friends, my colleagues, my extended family, and Lucas, my boyfriend who's been by my side through all of this, celebrated that achievement with me. And when the $5,400 in monthly support stopped flowing, suddenly they cared a whole lot about me and my success. Funny how that works. The house they're about to lose? I could have bought it outright with what I made from selling my app. The cars that got repossessed? I could have paid them off without blinking. The comfortable lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to? I was funding it while living in a modest house and driving a used car. The last I heard, Mom was still telling people that I'd come around eventually, that family is family, and that I'd realize I was wrong to cut them off. She's convinced this is just a phase, that I'm acting out, and that eventually I'll resume my role as the family ATM. She's about to learn that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt, and some ATMs, once they stop dispensing cash, stay permanently out of order. They cared when their $400 monthly bills stopped getting paid,